Hello marine biology students. In this final video before Assessment 1, we're going to talk about how and why we organize the diversity of life. So let's start talking about the different types of marine organisms. Evolution is defined as a gradual change in the genetic makeup of a population over time. Individuals in a population have genetic differences. In their ability to survive, in the form of finding food, avoiding being eaten, surviving disease, producing offspring, and many other attributes. Natural selection is the process by which the best adapted individuals are better survivors. And more of their gametes and more of their genes will make it into the next generation. The less adapted individuals may not survive to reproduce, or will reproduce less and thus pass less of their genes to the next generation. Or I guess I should say their offspring will make up a smaller portion of that next generation. As a result of natural selection, the population continually adapts to its environment. It evolves. As a result of natural selection, the gene pool of a species changes or shifts through time. By changing the frequency of less advantageous traits in favor of those that are better suited for survival, the gene pool changes as a result of pressures from the environment. This is what natural selection is. This is what drives evolution. Now, taxonomy is the science of classifying and naming different species that have resulted from the process of evolution. This classification is done using different characters, and it can include internal and external body structures, DNA and protein analysis, and even the particular places where species live, the habitat they're found in. Taxonomy uses several levels of classification. From the widest, being domain and then kingdom and phylum, to the smallest, which is the species level. Species are identified by the use of two names, the genus followed by the species epithet. Like Tursiops trachantis is the name of the bottlenose dolphin. This two-name system is known as the biological nomenclature. Now you may say, well, why don't you just use common names instead? And the problem with common names is that they aren't common everywhere. And in fact, the same name can refer to different organisms in different places. And so there can be a lot of confusion. Since science is an international endeavor, we want to have a naming system that can be used internationally by all individuals working on these organisms. And so the Linnaean hierarchy of domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and then identifying a species by its binomial nomenclature is the system that biology and marine biology use to describe species. So here in this chart, we can see the organization of us as humans, or Homo sapiens, versus a bottlenose dolphin, which is Tursiops truncatus. A species consists of individuals that have many characteristics in common and the ability to breed successfully with each other. This definition is called the biological species concept. And it is one way of defining a species. When two populations cannot interbreed, they are reproductively isolated from each other. and therefore they belong to two different species. Now, how do you know when there's been enough change for something to be called a new species? How much change is required for a new species to form? Well, it really all depends on which species concept is being used. The biological species concept, which we just talked about, is based on reproductive ability, but there are limitations to this definition. First off, it doesn't work for bacteria and other microorganisms, which primarily reproduce asexually. Next, it doesn't work for fossils or extinct organisms, for which reproductive behavior cannot be assessed or determined. And lastly, there are many exceptions. In biology, and some hybrid organisms can be formed between two species, both in captivity and in nature. There's a whole field of biology which tries to determine the relatedness of different organisms. This is known as phylogenetics. Phylogenetics is the study of evolutionary relationships or relatedness between different organisms. Biologists need to use many characteristics to determine the relatedness of organisms, such as their structure, their DNA, fossils, reproductive patterns, embryological and larval development, habitat, and behavior. All of these can be used to varying degrees to determine relatedness of different organisms. Of all of the fields of biology, phylogenetics sees significant changes relatively frequently. While this is a source of frustration for some, these changes come from new understandings of relationships based on new data and new information. The alternative to changing phylogenetic relationships is to keep them as they were, even though we have new conflicting information, which is really not the spirit of science. For the next several weeks, we're going to be talking about the diversity of life in the oceans. We're going to be discussing prokaryotic domains, such as domain bacteria and domain archaea. We're going to be talking about several of the kingdoms within the eukaryotic domain, and really looking at the diversity of life in the oceans. That's the end of the videos for this week. We're going to be moving on to discussing the diversity of life after Assessment 1. All right, see you in the next video.